Allora, buongiorno a tutti, vi do il benvenuto a questo appuntamento per la presentazione del nostro rapporto annuale sul mercato dei videogiochi in Italia per l'anno 2020. Ci fa piacere avervi qui con noi oggi e speriamo l'anno prossimo di riuscire a rivederci tutti di persona per questo appuntamento molto importante dell'associazione, che è il primo di solito durante l'anno. Oggi qui con noi abbiamo tre ospiti che faranno da speaker durante questo appuntamento. Il primo sarà Marco Saletta, il nostro presidente, seguirà Antonio Rubio, che è International Sales Director di B2Boost, la società di ricerca che collabora con la nostra Federazione Europea ISFE per la rilevazione dei dati di vendita sul mercato europeo attraverso il progetto Game Sales Data, GSD, e poi avremo Edoardo Mena, che è Research Director di Ipsos Mori, che ha invece curato la parte della ricerca relativa ai dati sul consumatore nell'ambito del progetto GameTrack, anche questo coordinato dalla nostra Federazione Europea ISFE. Al termine delle tre presentazioni abbiamo previsto uno spazio per le domande. Questo spazio sarà riservato alla stampa che partecipa all'evento. Vi chiediamo la cortesia, se avete delle domande al termine delle tre presentazioni, di scriverle direttamente nella chat generale e non ai singoli speaker. Ora io do la parola a Marco, vi ringrazio e ci vediamo poi al termine delle presentazioni. Grazie ancora a tutti.
Buongiorno, ciao a tutti. Allora, purtroppo per il secondo anno consecutivo ci troviamo a presentare i dati dell'andamento del videogioco in Italia in modalità online. La pandemia che ha segnato gli ultimi 13 mesi della storia di questo paese, ma in generale del mondo, ci sta ancora segregando, e proveremo a commentare dei dati comunque che sono dati importanti per il mercato italiano. Nel 2020 il videogioco si è ricavato uno spazio che è non solo di intrattenimento, ma anche di socialità, ma anche di uno spazio di connessione tra le persone, tra gli amici, tra conoscenti, e all'interno delle famiglie ha permesso di stare insieme e di passare del tempo in maniera più leggera in un contesto assolutamente drammatico per il paese. Nella prossima chart vi posso anticipare tutto quello che è stato il lavoro che abbiamo provato a fare nel 2020. Ci siamo lasciati di fatto, vedendoci l'ultima volta nel mese di febbraio, alla fine del mese di febbraio a Milano, raccontandovi il percorso che IDEA stava affrontando per il 2020, e quel percorso lo abbiamo rispettato. Abbiamo presentato i dati a marzo dello scorso anno, abbiamo svolto Face Playable, l'evento dedicato agli sviluppatori italiani. Abbiamo lanciato il portale Tutto sui videogiochi nel mese di giugno, per arrivare poi a luglio con l'esecuzione degli incontri di Face Playable. A settembre c'è stato il primo evento che avevamo annunciato di Round One con gli Sport Awards e tutto quello che era connesso al mondo dei videogiochi. Lo abbiamo fatto utilizzando tutta una serie di strumenti, di nuove tecnologie che ci permettessero di essere connessi con la nostra community, con gli sviluppatori e anche con voi, per aggiornarvi su tutto quello che IDEA stava facendo. Il risultato di questo 2020, come anticipavo, rispetto ai dati che vi verranno raccontati da Edoardo e Antonio, è un risultato straordinario. Il giro d'affari del mercato italiano si attesta a oltre 2 miliardi di euro, 2 miliardi 179 milioni di euro per l'esattezza, con una crescita del 22% verso il 2019. Un risultato incredibile. Noi non abbiamo mai in Italia superato i 2 miliardi di euro, e questo è avvenuto in un contesto chiaramente in cui il videogioco ha beneficiato del fatto che le persone fossero dentro casa, ricavandosi quel ruolo di socialità che vi anticipavo prima. nei vari segmenti sono tutti in crescita, tutti i segmenti dal digitale puro al prodotto per mobile, piuttosto che le console, con l'arrivo delle console di nuova generazione e l'affermazione di switch definitiva sul nostro mercato. Per quanto riguarda gli engagement, quindi quanto poi i giocatori effettivamente, trovandoci in una situazione di isolamento, hanno giocato, siamo arrivati a 8 ore a settimana, significa più di un'ora al giorno, dove poi le console domestiche hanno fatto in qualche modo, lo vedete più avanti, la parte del leone. 16 milioni,7 è il numero di videogiocatori, è un dato stabile rispetto a quello del 2019, circa il 38% della popolazione italiana. Questo significa che c'è ancora del lavoro da fare per far diventare quello che è diventato un fenomeno sociale, un fenomeno di massa più diffuso all'interno del nostro paese. Volendo guardare a quelle che sono le priorità per il prossimo anno, noi come IDEA continuiamo ad avere un impegno che è abbastanza consistente negli anni, non stiamo stravolgendo il nostro approccio alle priorità con cui vogliamo proteggere e difendere la nostra industria. Vogliamo supportare l'industria dei videogiochi attraverso il rafforzamento del rapporto con le istituzioni, sostenere i developer italiani che per noi rimangono uno degli asset più importanti della linea di azione di IDEA, favorire lo sviluppo degli sport, il round one che abbiamo lanciato lo scorso anno, lo vogliamo rilanciare ulteriormente nel corso di quest'anno, sperando di poter avere anche un evento fisico, e poi ci stiamo continuando ad impegnare per fare in modo che la promozione del videogame sia sempre e comunque in una modalità responsabile per le famiglie e per i nostri consumatori. Guardando al programma di lavoro per il 2021, oggi ci troviamo qui a commentare dal 2020, ad aprile inizieremo la nostra attività di censimento degli studi di sviluppo italiani. A maggio inizieremo la raccolta dei dati per il rapporto sugli sport, che poi presenteremo a settembre in occasione di round one. Stiamo già lavorando in maniera massiccia per First Playable, l'evento per gli sviluppatori indipendenti italiani di luglio, su cui contiamo anche in questo caso di avere una massiccia presenza di publisher internazionali, a testimonianza del fatto, come già avvenuto lo scorso anno, che l'evento si sta posizionando e che noi speriamo attraverso questo di dare sviluppo anche alla nostra industria locale. Dal punto di vista degli appuntamenti istituzionali stiamo lavorando in maniera intensa con i publisher internazionali per avere un position paper sul mondo degli sport, per trovare il modo di sfruttare al meglio tutti i fondi disponibili per First Playable, mentre in autunno ci concentreremo su attività di learning by playing, scusate, fondamentalmente incentrato sul ruolo e capire come fare leva del videogioco come strumento di apprendimento, e sul responsible gameplay. Per quanto riguarda gli strumenti, continueremo a utilizzare gli strumenti utilizzati nel corso di quest'anno, con una maggiore concentrazione su tutto quello che riguarda le attività e gli strumenti legati al mondo degli sport. Ci fa piacere, come abbiamo già comunicato nelle ultime 2 settimane, sottolineare come il mercato italiano sia sempre più centrale e abbia un ruolo di rilievo anche rispetto al contesto internazionale, anche questo testimoniato dall'entrata di 2 player globali, fatemi dire, centrali nel mondo, sia per quanto riguarda lo sviluppo che per quanto riguarda il mondo degli sport. E mi riferisco in modo particolare a Epic Games e Riot Games, 2 player che hanno deciso di entrare in IDEA con un apporto di idee, di contenuti particolarmente significativi, che siamo certi nei prossimi mesi sapremo illustrarvi e raccontarvi in maniera più precisa. Bene, io ho terminato, ci vediamo poi per la sezione di domande più tardi, e lascio la parola ad Antonio Rubio. Grazie.
Thank you, Marco. So, good morning, everyone. So, my name is Antonio. I'm working at B2Boost and taking care of the GSD project. So, GSD stands for Game Sales Data, and it's a project that is covering the the different sales in transactions across a good number of countries. So we are currently monitoring 16 countries worldwide, all major countries in Europe, along with Australia and New Zealand. And we are also monitoring digital transactions. So those purchases that are taking place in the different download platforms such as PlayStation Network, Xbox Live, Steam, and the Nintendo eShop. So this is what GSD stands for. So we are receiving data from retailers and publishers globally, so in a large number of countries, as I explained before. And we are trying to combine all them together to present a good picture of the market in different categories. So basically, in terms of the gaming industry, so we are presenting the sales figures for hardware, software, accessories, and hybrid toys, as long as value cards. So we are auditing the major categories in the gaming industry, and we are trying as part of this exercise that we are presenting today to provide you with a good insight about how big the market is, how healthy this industry has become in Italy over the last year. And as we will go deeper later on, we'll be able to show you that it remains a very exciting and appealing industry with a strong growth in 2020. So basically, in terms of our methodology, as I explained before, so we are combining our efforts to produce this annuary of video games with my colleague Eduardo, who will be introducing his part later on. He's in charge of the GameTrack panel, which is also an important tool to measure the market. He will explain his part later on. But in terms of GSD, so we are working on a weekly basis. So as I explained, we are receiving a number of information from retailers in different countries, and we are extrapolating them to be able to reach 100% of the market. It is a pure tool dedicated to the gaming industry that we have developed with a strong extrapolation methodology behind. We've been doing this exercise since 2014. So we have now a certain track, a certain history behind the tool. And in terms of digital, as I explained before, we are auditing the major platforms that are a channel to acquire games, so that are an alternative to the pure purchase of games at retail. So packaged goods it's been explained by me, so I will be handing over to my colleague Eduardo to explain the consumer demographics and how GameTrack is also complementing the initial foundation of this exercise, which is GSD.
Grazie, Antonio. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Buongiorno. My name is Eduardo Mena. I'm a research director at Ipsos Mori, and I'm here from London today. Unfortunately, it'd be really nice to be there and just be doing this presentation face to face. Been working in Ipsos for the last 15 years, but particularly GameTrack is a consumer study that we have been running for the last 10 years across the most important European markets, also in the US and Russia. I think the important thing is how we blend the data. On a monthly basis, we interview a strong base of people at overall level who are representative of the overall country. And then we aggregate results about the gaming behavior, how they play video games, preferences, and how they spend and invest money into the video game industry buying video games. And then we aggregate the results on a quarterly basis and report at country individual level. In this case, we're going to develop a really nice presentation about the evolution of the video game market in Italy. And it's quite a nice story to tell. We will be looking at the overall sales in terms of the overall volume and value, but also in terms of how people involve and evolve within the video game market and how the video game market actually comfort the players into the hard year that we have been living on. In terms of the methodology, across the year, we have interviewed around 12,000 people in each country, 1,000 per month. And also we interview a strong sample of offline people, face-to-face, just to understand and calibrate all findings to bring all our results to a context of each individual country. In terms of the digital and how we work with GSD and Antonio, we take their inputs in terms of the sales data, we merge them and integrating with the survey data to co-create an entire data set that includes sales data and extrapolation of the overall digital market in terms of the digital sales for the market. I think we will have questions at the end, but I think I will hand that over to Antonio. So he will take you through the overall sales in terms of the hardware and digital. I will take on in terms more about the consumer insights.
Thank you again, Eduardo. So as well presented initially by Marco, this been 2020 has been a really exciting year. So despite the difficulties caused by the COVID and the restrictions and so on, it's been an amazing year in terms of growth of this industry. So the gaming industry, and most specifically the Italian video game market, has been evolving in a very positive way, with two major remarks. First of all is the big increase, because it's been growing by 22% as compared to the previous year. And the second major takeaway for you to understand is that for the first time it's reaching the threshold of 2 billion euros, which is a major milestone. It's a major consequence of this growth. And it's been driven by both, because not only because of the software growth, which has been the major driver, but it's also been affected by the launch of the new consoles in terms of hardware, and the big growth in one of the categories that we're measuring in terms of hardware, which is the handheld. And within this handheld category, because of the big success of the, we can go backwards. I'm not, yeah, exactly, thank you. So mainly because of the growth also of the handheld devices, which been representing a major growth because of the success of the Switch Lite in Italy, growing by 50% as compared to the previous year. So the main category to be explained in this slide is the software, where it's accounting for nearly 82% of the market if we put together software and hardware. And in software, the market in Italy has been growing by 25%. Despite, as I said initially, despite the difficulties caused by the COVID, the growth in software has been amazing, 25% as compared to the previous year, and accounting for 1.8 billion already in terms of sales. If we go into the next slide. Yeah, so if I try to explain a little bit the hardware segment that we are measuring, when we are talking about hardware, as I explained initially in my presentation, we are putting together, same as for software, we are putting together data that we receive from the transactions, so from the purchases that are taking place in the different retailers, but also in the digital platforms for the software. And for the hardware part, we are aggregating consoles and accessories. So if we put together these two categories within hardware, the consoles and accessories, consoles have been growing by 7% in terms of value as compared to the previous year. This being caused by on the one hand, it's been a reduction on the legacy consoles, so on the previous generation console, but it's also been driven by a strong growth because of the launch of the PS5 and the Xbox Series. And also, as I explained before, because a console that is already existing in the market, like Switch, is been booming a lot, especially in their light format. So all in all, this has been accounting for nearly 70% of the total hardware sales, with a value of 275 million in 2020. If we take into account the accessories, the market is the value of the accessories, if we take it as a part of the total value of the hardware category in Italy, accounts for 30% of the value. And there's been a strong growth also in terms of accessories, 19%. And this 19% has been mostly boosted because of the strong sales of gamepads in the accessories category, which been a major success, mostly because of the existing consoles, but also boosted by the launch of the new generation of consoles, and therefore consumers acquiring new gamepads for the new generation. If we take into account also the split only in terms of consoles as part of the hardware category, the major market of the consoles, of course, is home consoles, where we are measuring all the PlayStation devices and Xbox devices and the Switch home device. And this is accounting for 275 million in total. And out of these, 245 million are coming from the home consoles, as explained before. It's been a slight decline in terms of value because, of course, many consumers were waiting for the new generation, and therefore they stopped buying the previous one. But all in all, it's been a good development, and the major growth, 70% growth as compared to the previous year, is coming from the handheld consoles. And as I explained initially, this is being derived from strong sales of the Switch Lite console. If we move onto the software part, which is this slide accounting for. So basically, in terms of software, we are putting together the transactions that are taking place in the different retailers. So no matter whether they are traditional retailers or brick and mortar or hypermarkets or web shops, but all in all, we are measuring all these transactions in Italy. And if we and at the same time, in terms of digital, we are measuring in combination with GameTrack, we are measuring the mobile applications related to gaming, and we are also complementing our digital panel with their inputs in order to produce the overall digital panel for Italy. So if we take into account the physical part of the market, so let's say those games that are being purchased at retail, all kinds of retail, so offline and online retailers, the market is been declining a little bit. So as opposed to what everyone could be thinking of, because we all tend to think that because of the restrictions and the COVID and the lockdown, people stop buying video games. So all in all, the number in the end, even for retailers, it's been not so critical, because the market was declining only by 6% in 2020 at retail. So very moderate decline, very small decline, also especially interesting by taking into consideration all the difficulties for the consumers to go to their traditional shops to buy video games. And the market is being really boosted by the strong and amazing growth in terms of digital. These digital sales mostly coming from console, for games for the consoles, especially driven by strong sales in PlayStation Network and Xbox Live, and accounting for a growth of 33% as compared to the previous year. So we can conclude by saying that consumers had it more difficult because of the lockdowns to go to the shops, but they didn't stop consuming video games. They, on the opposite, they turned to the digital platforms to acquire games, and they did it in a very strong way, which by large compensated the decline in retail, because as presented before, so the market is been growing by 33% in digital as compared to the previous year. So the market is pretty much digital. So if we take into account this 1.8 billion of euros sold in Italy for software, so out of this amount, 45% was performed in the digital platforms. Nearly 40% was coming from mobile applications, and the remaining 16% of the market was coming from the physical, so the games purchased at retail. So all in all, a strong growth in digital in general, and as I say, all in all, showing that the industry is still healthy and is growing a lot over the last year. If we take into account the top best selling games in 2020 in Italy, so we are putting together in this slide the physical formats, so those being purchased at retail, and also the digital downloads. And all in all, if we take this top 20 from last year, so FIFA 21 was the best-selling product in Italy. Second one was for many years in a row was Grand Theft Auto, which remains healthy despite it's been quite a few years now in the market. And the third one was the previous version of FIFA 20. So as you can see, I mean, we have a good number of titles in here. So the main remarkable part is that some titles, or I mean, consumers still rely on the AAAs. So we see that the top 5 titles is related to titles that were already existing in the market and simply launched new versions or simply evolved like same for Call of Duty, same for The Last of Us, same for Animal Crossing. So titles that were already existing in the market that continue being invested on by the publishers and continue being relaunched. So enough from my side. So I will be handing over to my colleague Eduardo to discuss the next slides, which will also be giving you a stronger perspective about the video games industry in Italy, because they will be complementing this view, which is pure numbers or pure figures are coming from transactions in the market, with that of the consumer demographic. So what is the consumer profile in Italy? What kind of behaviors they are having when acquiring video games? What are the traditional patterns? What kind of devices they are using, etc. So up to you, Eduardo, to continue.
Thank you so much, Antonio. Very interesting, the numbers, and it's really good to see the strong growth that the Italian video game market has got during 2020. And I think at the heart of it is basically all these 1.8 billion that were moved in terms of consuming video games, and an excess of 2 billion in terms of the investing is moved by the players, by the video game players at the heart, who are the ones who are engaging with the overall ecosystem. At overall level, GameTrack has launched in the market since Q4 2018. Since we have been following this on a quarterly basis, and this is kind of just the evolution about the overall, the incidence or the reach of playing video games on any available device in Italy since Q4 2018. At overall level, we have seen that it has increased just marginally from 37% of the overall population to 38% of the overall population playing on any device, any possible video game available. It's a very consistent reach at overall level, is strong. Nevertheless, there is further potential to engage. And we know that it's around 40, is nearly 2 out of 5 people playing video games age 6 to 64 in Italy. Nevertheless, when we compare across other countries, we saw that there are other countries where engagement is slightly higher and the reach is higher. So then definitely is more potential to grow, and is, as we have seen during the last year, there is more and further, the future is bright basically for the overall Italian market. What it means, and if we move to the next one, is that this 38% of the overall population equals around 16.7 million video game players in Italy in 2020. That's a really strong base of players, and when we take into consideration, make very basic accounts in terms of the overall revenue created by these 17 million people, means that the overall people, on average, the players spend around 110 to 120 euros at overall level in the ecosystem. Other very important thing is the makeup of these 16.7 million people. What we know is around 56% are males, so it's still slightly skewed towards men, and 44% are females. Nevertheless, what we have seen is females have taken up gaming in a stronger manner in terms of reach, but more important in terms of engagement. By age, what we see in the graphic underneath that is that around 1 in 4, and it's very strong, this 13 and 11%, 24% are within the age of 15 to 24. It's a key demographic for video games at overall level. Nevertheless, do not underestimate the 45 to 64 just because they are the growth of the population, but around 22% of the overall player base is within this age span. Also, around 19% is within the 25 to 34, where we have seen growth across the European markets and also across Italy. So I think at overall level, it's very important to see, like, it's very balanced. It's not the usual video game player that you will see, like, it's a younger male playing the attic on the console or PC. It's actually video games is for all. It's 40%. 4 out of 10 will play video games on any device. And it's fairly balanced in terms of gender, and it has a really nice distribution in terms of age. If we move to the next one, what we mean is this, and I think it's the 17 million people at overall level, they play on any device. And on the left-hand side, we have the overall reach amongst the overall population on the 6 to 64. But on the right-hand side, we got the overall number of players by key devices. And people snack play and engage in different ways with different devices. I think the most popular device in Italy, and it's been by a couple of quarters, and actually a year already, is a smart device. Everything that we play on app, smartphones and tablets, basically is a reach of around 11 million people. What means is like 1 out of 4 people play app games on a smartphone or a tablet. A smartphone be the most popular, reaching on nearly 10 million people, and on a tablet around 4 million people. The second most popular device, and is the legacy, the PC, the first device where you could play video games, and it reached around 7.2 million people, which is around 15% of the overall population in Italy. And the third one is any console at all. We include consoles and portables and handhelds within that, and it's around 6.8 million people, fairly dominated by larger consoles such as the PS4, the Xbox, the PS5, the Xbox Series, and the Switch. But also it's a strong contribution of around 1.9 million of people who play on portable. The most important thing is that if you add all these numbers, obviously they will overadd to the overall number, but then the 16.7 million people play across devices. You play on a console a longer session, you go for a walk, and you play on your smartphone, and then you come back and play your multiplayer PC game at night when you are more engaged. So it's all these dynamics and interactions are the ones that are really moving the market ahead. If we move to the next one, then it's not only about this, how these numbers are made up. So in terms of the consoles, what we saw in the previous is like just 6.9 that are made out of 6.7 million playing console, plus an extra 1.9 playing handheld devices. At overall level, the profile of gamers is around 53%, 56% males and 44% females. In terms of the console, what we perceive is that it's 63% male and 37% female, which is more biased towards male. And I think there is further potential for the console market to actually reach and engage women into the video game industry. And there are really nice stories at the overall European market where women are really taking up games in terms of playing, but also in investing. So it's further potential to engage. In terms of PC, very similar, and actually it's exactly the same break in terms of the overall gender break. 63% are males, which equals 4.5 million people who play PC, versus 2.7 million people or women who play PC games. So it's 63 against 37%. Nevertheless, the most popular device that we can see is smart device gaming with 11 million is, as you can see, fairly balanced. It just tips towards males. Actually, women are the ones who are the engine behind the gamer numbers on a smartphone and tablets. And they basically like 51 males versus 49% women. So it's very strong participation and actually contribution to the overall video game industry of women, particularly within the app ecosystem. If we move to the next one, so it's not only about actually people playing devices. We have seen that has been stable and pretty much really evolving slowly. But in terms of engagement, it's another very different story. It has moved very quick. Up to Q4 2020, on average, every gamer on any device play around 8 hours across any device at overall level. And nevertheless, when we break that on the right-hand side chart, is how many hours play on each individual device. We saw that consoles were the least popular, but in terms of engagement are the ones that players are spending the most. They spend across around 7 hours per week playing on these devices. And that had increased. 2 years ago, in Q4 2018, they used to play for 5.3 hours. It means an extra 1.5 hours peak console players are playing on these devices. The second most popular and more engaging device is a smartphone and tablets. Players are playing consistently about 5 hours per week. That has evolved. Q4 2018, when we start GameTrack, app gamers are used to play 4.2 hours on smart devices. And PC, very stable at overall level, 4.7 hours per week. Nevertheless, when we compare 2 years ago, they used to play around 4.1 hours. So it's, again, an extra half hour being played into the market. And what that means, if we move to the next one, is that the overall evolution of video game, the gaming time through that time, back when we go back to quarter 4 2018, on average, every single video game player used to play around 6.7 hours. A year ago, that engagement increased to 7.4 hours. And now, last year, at overall level, quarter 4 2020, video game players increased their engagement with the medium, playing for around 8 hours per week. That's a full, nearly an extra hour and a half more of engagement. And that's the main driver of the overall evolution of the market in terms of revenue, but also in terms of comfort and feelings of the video game player. So it's a really nice story in terms of basically very stable and strong base of players. Nevertheless, increasing engagement through the medium. And it's particularly driven by the year that we have lived. If we move to the next one, something that we will be able to see is the detail in terms of the time spent on particular devices. We already saw that the top engagement device is consoles with nearly 7 hours per week. That had increased by 1.6. But the most important thing is which are the devices that are creating that engagement. PS4 still be the lead, around 6.3 hours among those who play PS4. Nevertheless, as Antonio said, Switch is making huge stakes in the last 2 years, start with around 0.6 million players estimated by all research in Italy back 2 years ago. Right now, it's a very strong base of nearly 1.7 million Switch players, but playing for around 4.7 hours per week. And also, despite the fact that they were launched at the very end of quarter 4, PS5 and Xbox Series are there, and the players are already taking these devices, 500 of them, and they're playing for around 3 hours on these devices. Smart devices is still there, 5 hours per week, and on smartphones, 4 hours, and tablets around 4. So it's very balanced in terms of devices. It's more about the reach. And computers is around 4.7 hours. So definitely engagement is there, and is which are the devices who, if you invest more time, you tend to invest more in new games or more in extras for new games. If we move to the next one, I think something that is basically the big elephant in the room. We have gone through a very difficult year last year, and we're still in it, actually. That's why I'm in London. I would like to be in Milan making this presentation face-to-face. But within our game research that we run at Ipsos, we wanted to look and understand better the feeling and the comfort that the video games are creating in the consumer, the player. And there are a couple of slides which I'm going to explain you in terms of the engagement, the comfort, and how actually the support that the video game have actually given to the overall video game ecosystem. So if we move to the next one, I think there is a nice story in terms of the overall engagement. And there is here in this graphic, we see the overall estimates of the average gaming time people play across any devices on each individual quarter. As we said previously, we just cut that data in terms of the individual quarters, but if we see slowly the process quarter by quarter, we will understand that where basically people were locked inside just because of the pandemic restrictions within their household. Basically, if you see quarter 1 and quarter 2, 2020, the gaming time and engagement with the video games peak, and we started quarter 4 to 2018 at 7.1. It went down to quarter 2, 2019 at 6.5, but then a year later, it increased by an hour and 2 hours at 8.2 and 8.5 hours per week. So it means that people actually, when we were restricted to go out, we tried to engage with content that we got at home. Not only video games, we saw that we do lots of research in Ipsos about how people interact with video game and content, and also every in-home entertainment. It was more about the streaming, the TV, how people engage with books and actually audiobooks as well. So video games actually offer that open that window to actually play and discover new worlds. Discoverability was a very important driver of the overall video game industry. We saw that the video game industry grew in terms of revenue generated by video games, and particularly full game downloads, because people decide to discover new games, new stories, and navigate through those. And as soon as you invest money, you invest time, and this is the full reaction of that. As soon the first restriction or the first wave of the restrictions happened, gaming time decreased, and that was obviously predicted. Nevertheless, it didn't go down as it started. Right now, in Q3 2020, the video game market, the video game time was about 8 hours per week across any device, far higher than the previous at 7.6. And then when we started just hitting the last quarter of the year, within the second wave of restrictions, we saw that that video game market, actually the video game time, is still stable at 8 hours per week. And top line data is showing that had increased again, just because we have been restricted. So as basically video games actually offer another window for the players to go, fly, and dream, and basically live a sort of social life that we were basically caught at that moment. If we move to the next one, a couple of questions that we asked during Q2, the first wave of restrictions were basically looking at the agreement level in terms of how the players felt and agreed to individual statements, as playing video games have helped me to stay connected with friends, about feeling less isolated, about feeling this anxiety that obviously the restrictions and the pandemic had created amongst all. But more importantly, it's about feeling happier. And I think the most important thing is around 1 in 4 to 1 in 5, actually, at overall, all the players agree that actually playing video games is the natural feeling that I got. And it's basically 23% of the player base say like, yes, I'm connecting with friends. It helps me to feel less anxious. 25% actually saying like, actually playing video games, it makes me feel happier. And it's something that we underestimate, but happy is a very important feeling that we need. And we need to be happy in order to be functional. The most important thing is amongst those players who play online multiplayer games, multiplayer online, actually that feeling of happiness, that feeling of being in touch with friends, that feeling of less anxiety was far stronger. So what it actually means is playing online video games and online multiplayers play a strong supporting role to the players. And that means that because we were restricted to meet outdoors, to meet with restrictions, we met virtually in these virtual spaces that the video game industry created for us. So it's about the comfort that the video game industry support all the video game players in Italy particularly. Not only about the players, and if we move to the next one, it actually was a very nice story in terms of the families and how the video game industry support families, parents, and children. When we talk about, we ask the same question about like, are you playing more video games with your kids, or are you playing more educational video games with your kids? So it means that the parent also plays video games, so they are gaming parents. We actually ask like, are you doing more, a lot more, a bit more, about the same, a little bit less, or just a lot less? And what we found is actually the stronger proportion was those who were doing more at overall level. So 1 out of 5 parents who play video games, they claim they were playing more video games with their kids. And actually that rises a little bit more amongst those parents of 6 to 10. When you start with kids, actually my daughter is 8 years old, start comprehending more about the video game ecosystem, you can take it more, and they engage further with any kind of content that you give to them. Well, not only that, but actually parents also use video games as an educational tool. There are far too many games where you can actually understand and give help in terms of organization skills, maths, building blocks. And again, 1 out of 5 parents say, yes, I'm playing more educational games with my kids. But actually that increase, and is significantly relevant, is also to nearly 3 out of 10 play with amongst parents who are 6 to 10, which is a key age where schools were closed and you were at home trying to cope with your work, trying to cope with homeschooling, but also trying to entertain and engage with them. And I think video games actually gave that comfort and open again that window to comfort and actually teaching at the same time. And I think with this slide, I just want to close the presentation and open the floor for any Q&A. And actually, just to summarize, it's been a really volatile year, but it's a very positive for the overall video game industry in Italy. 17 million people move around an excess of 2 billion euros for the video game ecosystem at overall level. And actually, not only about the money, but offer comfort and make the feelings happier amongst the player base. Thank you so much.
Grazie Edoardo, grazie Antonio e grazie Marco. Vi ricordo che adesso apriamo una sessione di Q&A. Se avete voglia di fare qualche domanda, vi preghiamo di farla direttamente, di scriverla direttamente in chat. In questo momento, siccome abbiamo un audience che comprende anche i nostri associati, chiediamo di dare la priorità appunto ai giornalisti e con i soci avremo modo poi di approfondire gli argomenti trattati in un'altra sede. Per favore scrivete nella chat generale e non direttamente ai nostri singoli panelist. Ok, abbiamo una prima domanda da un socio. Ecco, benissimo. Allora, invito tutti a postarle subito le domande se le avete, in modo da... Allora, okay, we have a first question from an esports team, member of the association. Okay, the first question is Nintendo Switch considered in your data to be a home console or a handheld console?
Okay, I guess this is for me.
Exactly.
This first question, yeah. Second one is I was going through, so the second one is for Eduardo. So first question is, yeah, Switch, we are splitting in two. So Switch Lite is considered a handheld device, so it's reported as a handheld device, whereas the Switch standard model is considered a home device. So I hope this is answering the question. So Switch Lite is handheld, Switch standard is a home device for us.
I think, just to be totally aligned, I think that's how we defined it within GameTrack as well. Nevertheless, I think in the last year, just because the Switch has revolutionized the market, as we have seen in the Italian market, and not only in Italy, but across the Europe and the world, I think what we have defined, like just the overall console ecosystem, including portable devices. So it's at overall level, we just defined that because, yeah, it became a little bit blurry and gray areas are just causing confusion. And I imagine that the second question is for myself. And if I understand, my Italian is correct, is I think the video game market has decreased a little bit from 37 to 39? Or?
No, I mean, as of Q4 2018, Italian gamers remain between 37 and 39% of the population. What is still holding back, in your view?
I think at overall level is the different dynamics of each country. I think the Italian market, I mean, the video game industry will need, at the heart, the games are the ones that brings the gamers and the players, but also it's about the hardware and the infrastructure. Obviously, there is going to be lots of anxiety to buy the new devices and the investment. And I think one of the key dynamics in the Italian market is the free-to-play. As you can see, the most popular device where people and players interact with the medium is smart devices, smartphone and tablets. This is a device that you got in your pocket. Everyone in the population, 95% of the overall population will have a smart device in their pockets. Accessing content and video games to that device become, I mean, the only barrier that you will see is how friendly and familiar are you with technology, because not even it's about price. You can 95% or excess of 95% of the overall 701 million people created by the app ecosystem is created by free-to-play. So I think free-to-play is a big player in the Italian market and is driving some of the revenue from other markets, but particularly Italy is strong. So it's about how we position the value of the pay-to-play within the overall proposition of video games. Is how the bigger other ecosystem, console and PC, try to gravitate people towards them just because of the content, and the content is key. We have seen that not only in video games, but also in streaming. It's just the magic. Disney was launched last year. In a year, had managed to get 100 million new streamers in the system. So I think if we just create beautiful content, incredible games that address every single age and gender, that people will feel curious, will start testing, and will invest time and revenue and create revenue in the full ecosystem. Hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, there are two other questions, three other questions in English. Okay, the first two are in English. I think the first one from Giulia Martino is still for you, Eduardo, about women. You recently published also a very interesting analysis on your website on this subject.
Yes. I think, so basically I will do it. You show that console market has still enormous possibilities to engage more women to play. Which are the steps to take, in your view, to increase the overall appeal of home console gaming to women? Then, that just coincides with a piece that we just released at Ipsos last week in terms of we are in the International Women's Day and in the International History Month for Women. And I think what we have seen in the last year is the important role of the overall European market, in the role of the women, not only as players, but as content creators as well, is how the industry will need to bring women to create the women. So basically we say games recreate games made by women for women, and there are important things that will create that association of games with women, so they feel and they actually wanted to interact with that intellectual property, that the beautiful games. There's very successful stories in the last year. I think one that we named that particular thought piece is The Last of Us, where basically it's about the characters, the key leads in the games. Instead of being the man, the warrior, actually was the women, basically just and describing the full conflict that a normal women will have in that hypothetical situation, and how the player actually impersonalize that character and drive the history and that their own history through the game. So I think that there is one that is about association, how we associate more women into the market and into the video game market. The other one is about how the industry brings that in, so actually the industry evolves and moves forward, and how that creation and basically embrace more women to not only play video games, but engage into the overall ecosystem.
Okay, thanks, Eduardo. We have two more questions that are, almost about the same matter, about the availability of new generation consoles. Our chairman can answer these two questions. Please go on, Marco.
Grazie, Talita. Sì, oggettivamente il tema della scarsità di console che ha impattato sul lancio dell'emergenza per quanto riguarda Sony e Microsoft, impatta sul numero di crescita del dato di hardware. Ma non è solo quello in realtà l'allocazione di prodotto che il mercato italiano ha avuto di tutte e tre i brand che vendono console è ormai vera da almeno settembre. C'è un tema di approvvigionamento di microprocessori sul mercato globale, su cui il mondo del videogame si sta confrontando oggi con altre categorie che fino a un anno fa non compravano microprocessori. È un tema, qualcuno l'avrà anche sentito, anche l'amministrazione di Biden oggi sta affrontando, perché sta impattando per esempio sulla produzione di autoveicoli che utilizzano microprocessori come non è mai stato fatto prima nel recente passato. Dire quanto quel numero, che oggi vale più 7%, sarebbe potuto essere in una condizione di free supply è estremamente complicato dirlo. Se è vero che ancora oggi, alla fine del mese di marzo 21, gli stock di tutti e tre i produttori di hardware sono decisamente inferiori alla esigenza e alla domanda di mercato. Un tema molto sentito dal retailer italiano oggi è la mancanza di promozionalità, che è figlia della scarsità di disponibilità di prodotto. Non so dirvi se nel corso di quest'anno questa scarsità di prodotto sarà risolta in qualche modo. È chiaro che i produttori stanno facendo di tutto per dare una risposta alla domanda non solo in Italia, devo dire la verità, questo è vero in tutto il mondo. Noi ovviamente speriamo di trovare soddisfazione di questa domanda per poter rispondere al consumatore italiano in modo adeguato.
Okay, grazie Marco. Then we have a question, I think, for both Antonio and Eduardo. How can we comment on digital sales figures? It is clear that the pandemic has changed our buying habits for video games for obvious reasons, but could this soon become a new trend in our market? In other words, are Italian gamers becoming finally more digital?
Yeah, I can pick that one. So, so what we have been noticing over the last year in 2020 is that if we compare what was the trend in Italy in the previous year, so we could say that Italy was evolving very slowly towards digitalization. So if we compare it to some other markets in reference in 2018, 2019, and so on. So Italy was a little bit lagging behind France or Spain or Germany in terms of adoption of digital. However, if we take into consideration the numbers of or the figures of the last year, there's been a tremendous speeding up in terms of adoption of digital consumption. So this has been, of course, caused probably because of the lockdown, because of the difficulties to access the retailers. But it's also proving that there was a room for moving faster towards digitalization in Italy. And that's something if we compare it to some other countries like Spain or France, we notice that even despite the difficulties of the COVID, they have been evolving in a regular way towards digitalization, a little bit faster, but in a regular way. But the biggest market in terms of this jump towards digitalization in Europe has been Italy over the last year. So yeah, so there was it's been we have to see. I mean, once the market is totally back to normal, I mean, probably how the situation is gonna be. If we take into account the final number of the year, we notice that there's been a pickup in retail because retail only declined by 6% despite all the difficulties. So we notice that the consumers are going back to the retailers. So that's a fact. That's the final number of the year. But there is a strong growth in terms of digital consumption. So.
You know, I'd like to add to that one is also despite the physical format of games is being weakened, and we know that it's decreasing by 6%. Still not that. Still bringing 280 million, which is very strong figure. And I think is how we understand players at overall level. There are the collectors who like just to have the 200 games that they have played the entire life and at the back, and they would like to see them and they would like to just unbox them. So definitely, yes, we have gone through a year where accelerated digitalization has happened, and everyone has discovered new ways to digitalize themselves, including video game players. So they used to have the bots, but they just acquired the full game download. As some retailers open, I guess there is still that regression in terms of package and weaken it, but it's still important to bring that into context.
Okay, thanks, Antonio and Eduardo. We have two more questions left. One is in English for you, Antonio, about subscription packages' influence on the overall gaming sales. Can you please answer to this?
Yeah, I mean, we are, to be quite honest, I mean, we are not measuring free-to-play, so it's not part of the scope of a GSD. GSD is measuring only full paid games downloads. So probably with some of the insights that GameTrack is putting, Eduardo is more qualified than me to answer this question, because we are not measuring free-to-play, so I cannot give a detailed answer on that. So
I think the free-to-play, what it has done is just changing the dynamics in terms of how the revenue is generated. And I think the fact that the video game market is still increasing in terms of revenue and engagement, it means that it's just the dynamic that make it to it. It's not that people are playing for free, it's that they are just being monetized in another way. So if anything, I think free-to-play has just increased the overall revenue created by the market. The full ecosystem is the app market. It generates 701 million the last year and increasing at a very strong rate of, I would say, maybe around 20%. Yeah, 36% versus last year, if I'm correct. Yeah. So it's just, it has accelerated engagement and the other ways of payment that you can actually just invest into the system. In particularly in terms of the subscriptions within GameTrack, we take it as a pay to play, because that's the only way that you can actually access the libraries of games such as Game Pass or PS Now or NVIDIA systems, or actually a streaming service devices such as Stadia or Arcade, which includes other ecosystem. Like, still very young, and particularly in Italy, I think there is just 1% of the overall population who claim they subscribe to these services. And they, according to GameTrack, they generate less than around 40 million euros out of a market which is nearly, it's in excess of 2 billion. So definitely it's still small, it's moving in the right direction, but it's still a lot to happen within the streaming market, particularly in Italy. There are other markets which are a little bit ahead, but it's still being the largest minority in terms of people who play it and pay for that, and also the revenue generated by the full ecosystem.
The last question is for Marco. Marco, oh, okay, no, we have another one then. Okay, Marco.
Sì, allora, ciao Matteo. Non c'è dubbio che le piattaforme di streaming sono un competitor, però citava prima Edoardo, uno degli elementi fondamentali oggi per fruire di contenuti di intrattenimento è la qualità del contenuto stesso. Io credo che quello che è accaduto nel corso del 2020 sui livelli di tempo viene speso a videogiocare, ci dice che in realtà il videogame oggi non ha timore di confrontarsi con le piattaforme di streaming, che i contenuti sono contenuti di qualità. È stato citato forse da qualcuno, non solo è cresciuto il mercato digitale, ma è anche cresciuto il numero dei giochi che sono stati utilizzati rispetto al 2019. Questo è chiaramente figlio di una maggiore quantità di tempo, no? Che abbiamo avuto di stare dentro casa per intrattenerci. Il 2020 da questo punto di vista sembra un po' uno spartiacque, ma sicuramente ha dei dati anomali che vedremo più normalizzati nel corso del 2021. Se la competizione sarà solo con le piattaforme di streaming non lo so che ci sono però già dei modelli di business simili a quelle delle piattaforme di streaming televisivo, che sono le piattaforme di Sony e Microsoft, che in qualche modo strizzano l'occhio a quel modello. Vediamo il consolidamento dei dati del 2021, ma secondo me, per come ci siamo mossi nel 2020, credo che la competizione sarà piuttosto sui contenuti e la qualità dei contenuti che non sulla modalità di diffusione di quei contenuti.
Marco, penso che tu possa rispondere anche alla domanda di Gianluca sui limiti strutturali italiani.
Sì, allora, ciao Gianluca, i limiti infrastrutturali italiani sulla banda larga di tablet 5G hanno frenato una crescita che avrebbe potuto essere ancora maggiore pure nel 2020. Vista la particolare situazione, non hanno avuto un reale impatto. Sì, Gianluca, credo che in qualche impatto ce lo abbiano avuto. Voglio fare riferimento ai numeri che stanno circolando in questi giorni, dove 850.000 bambini italiani non hanno accesso alla DAD per limiti legati sia alle infrastrutture che alla disponibilità di strumenti IT, no? Quindi sicuramente questo è vero. Non ci dobbiamo però dimenticare il ruolo del retailer fisico, cioè se in qualche modo da qualche parte c'è un limite di banda larga, oggi il negozio fisico può ancora sopperire all'acquisto digitale con l'acquisto di prodotto fisico, dove peraltro sui dati di Day One importanti del 2020 la parte fisica la fa ancora, svolge ancora un ruolo determinante in termini di quota tra fisico e digitale. Quindi sì, forse qualcosa è mancato per i di banda larga, però sicuramente c'è il negozio fisico che può ancora sopperire. Il vero tema è se poi questo mercato diventerà tutto digitale, come già accaduto ad altre categorie dell'intrattenimento, come la musica o il cinema, oppure resterà in quota parte anche fisico. Credo la domanda non ha una risposta, il 2021 sarà ancora una volta un anno di verifica di questa condizione.
Benissimo, io non vedo altre domande al momento, per cui se non ci sono altre domande, io ringrazierei tutti per essere stati con noi oggi e ringrazierei anche i nostri due ricercatori, Antonio Rubio e Edoardo Mena, per aver condiviso con noi una lettura di dati. E vi ricordo che a brevissimo il rapporto sarà pubblicato sul nostro sito internet sia in lingua italiana che in lingua inglese e riceverete tutti il nostro comunicato stampa. Un caro saluto e speriamo di rivederci tutti presto di persona. Grazie ancora da parte di IIDEA.
Grazie mille.
Ciao, grazie.
Grazie mille.
Ciao, grazie.
Ciao.